Join us, come on in.
Okay.
And if you have any questions at all throughout, just give me a shout and we can go through questions and answers at the end if you want, or we can do it during whatever works for people. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit, I'll talk to you a tiny bit about myself, where I come from and stuff, a little bit about work-life balances, so the consequences of the imbalance that we all kind of suffer in terms of work-life, and blood sugar imbalances, per food choices, understanding what it means to be healthy. I think that's a very important thing, because there's a meaning out there for everyone, but if you can hit your numbers in terms of parameters that you should be meeting, that's when you know you're kind of in good health. So having that measurable, I think, is a very, very important thing. So knowing where you stand in relation to that is a good thing. So what is good health, practical steps and how you can achieve it. So things like that will involve the real food lifestyle, the importance of sleep, and obviously exercise as well, and then we'll do some questions and answers. All right? So a little bit about myself. So I'm a registered nutrition practitioner. I have a passion for helping people achieve health goals as they relate to diet and nutrition. I've my own business, it's called Health by Orla, but I work from the principle of functional medicine. So I do a lot of work from the why. So if two people come to me with IBS, for example, inevitably I will give them very different protocols, because there'll be very different things that would have happened in their lifestyle to get them to that point, you know. So we work on various different mediators, triggers for those events. It could be it stress, be it sugar, be it, you know, whatever it is. So we work on the why of what's got you to that point, rather than just on an isolated set of symptoms. So I work in Dundrum, and I also work out of Malahide as well. So I specialise in the areas of autism, ADHD, digestive health, autoimmunity, and mental and skin health, and things like that. All right? Not at all. Come on in. Come on in. I've literally just started, so. So talking a little bit about work-life balance. So it's defined by Clark as satisfaction and good functioning at work and at home with a minimum of role conflict. So we all know what that means in terms of you know, having the same energy in your home life as you do in your work life. And very often that's not the case. Your work life will encroach upon your personal life at home. So it's trying to see if there's anything that we can do in terms of foods and lifestyle, and if there's any things we can put into place to minimise that imbalance and to try and make it more balanced for ourselves. So yeah, so having enough time between work and home, and then there's a lot of things that can happen in terms of the imbalances the consequences of those imbalances. The biggest thing is fatigue, and I think everyone's very familiar with what that is, you know, in terms of, you know, being stressed out at work. So fatigue, just absolutely exhausted physically from when you get home, and you've no energy then left to do anything in your homework or your home life, be it playing with the kids, be it doing an extracurricular activity, be it, you know, exercise, whatever it is. So it can be very, very demotivating as well. Stress is a huge factor at work as well. We all can be very stressed and take on a lot of stress. So it's being able to reduce that when you're at home as well, to balance that out. So it can lead to things like disrupted sleeping patterns, depression, low mood. You suddenly become very, very irritable, very fatigued, very annoyed. Mental exhaustion, where you feel you can't physically take on any more information, you can't process anything more as well. And which all lead to very much pure productivity or poor productivity, a lack of focus, a lack of direction, because you're trying to do too many things at once. So is there anything in our lives that we can do in order to support ourselves through these? So things, you know, things that we can do would be, from my point of view, would be foods. So looking at the foods that we're eating from we get up in the morning till we go to bed at night, do they facilitate work-life balance, or do they hinder it? Do they stress it even more? Do they add fuel to the fire? So every time you eat and drink, you're either feeding disease or you're fighting it. So a lot of the time, if we're eating huge amount of sugar, huge amount of processed foods, all of those kind of things, we are then leading ourselves to become more irritable, mood isn't great, focus isn't great, functionality is not great. So again, looking at what we can do in that situation to try and minimize the stress that we bring upon ourselves as well. Obviously there's physical stresses that we have at work in terms of, you know, being at work and being with people and everything else, and your workload itself. But you don't want your body to be in a stressful situation as well all the time. So having to digest all of the sugars, having to digest all of the processed carbohydrates, and using a huge amount of your energy where it could be put on mental focus. Okay? So having a think about the foods that we eat all the time. So just a little bit about the imbalances that sugar can create. So blood sugar imbalance, and I'm sure you're definitely all very familiar with the process. So blood sugar levels drop, so you become a little bit cranky, your blood sugars are a little bit low, you might be a little bit shaky. you know you need food. So you eat generally like a coffee and a muffin is what you would grab for something quick, an instant hit of sugar. Your blood sugar will then rise rapidly and you'll feel great for a period of time. And then after your insulin will pick up all of the glucose and try and get it into the cells, then any extra, because if that's full, any extra will go on as fat and will store it as fat. But in terms of our mood, our blood sugars will then drop again and we'll start to become even more cranky, even more irritable. And someone can ask us a really simple question, or it could be sitting in traffic and someone pulls out and we just lose the plot. That's when you'll then grab for something quicker again, so it'll be another coffee and a chocolate bar or something like that, you know? And it repeats the whole time, and that's just a process. So you can have things like a roller coaster. So you have your cereal bar, for example, you're producing a lot more insulin. Then you have your coffee, again, much more insulin. And then you have a cookie at your 3 p.m. slump, again, a lot more insulin. And then you have an ice cream at dinner or something like that. So your blood sugars are going up and down constantly like that. So those are the situations where you're not doing anything beneficial for your body in that point. Excuse me. What you want to be looking at is you want to be making sure that you have protein and fats. So what that'll do is that'll stabilize the blood sugars the whole way through. So anytime you're having snacks, making sure that you can try and add a protein source or add a fat source to that in order to stabilize the sugar release into the system. And I don't always just mean foods when I say that. I also mean drinks. A lot of the time, if you can see this little display here, we often forget about the drinks that we take, and we often forget about the amount of sugars that can be in them as well. So things like your bottle of Coke, like there's 53 grams of sugar in that bottle of Coke, you know, and if you had one of those a day, that's over 250 grams of sugar a week. That's one full cup of sugar a week, and you can see the sugar underneath. If you physically sat down to try and take a spoon into that, you know, you wouldn't do it, but yet that's the same effect it's having on your body, and that's the same thing it's doing. So again, just to be very, very aware of the amount of sugar that you can consume outside of physical foods as well. Be very aware of beverages, be very aware of, you know, snack cereals and things that are sweetened. It is, you know, it is quite shocking, and particularly as well for kids, it can be very, very beneficial to see, because kids will get a drink all the time. They'll get the fruit shoots, or they'll get some kind of Red Bull, or maybe even iced teas. The Ribena actually is the big one, I think, for kids. I mean, it's marketed as a health food because of the blackcurrant and things like that, but there's a lot of sugar in it. Which is why diabetes now is so prevalent, which is why Jamie Oliver's doing a huge campaign in the UK as well for sugar. So beware of where your sugar is coming from, not always just foods. So again, looking at some of the detrimental effects of poor food choices. So the evidence is it is sugar. Sugar's our enemy, so sugar causes inflammation. So the insulin-resistant fat cells you pack on when you eat too much sugar, they produce little chemical messengers called cytokines, and they can cause an awful lot of damage to our brain as well. So that will affect mood. So they're saying they've called depression metabolic syndrome type 2. So that's a new part of research as well. Ones to be aware of are refined carbohydrates and sugars, because what they do is they use up our B vitamins. As we all know, B vitamins are fantastically important for energy, but also for our mood as well. And B vitamins tend to work synergistically together as well. So in a study published in the British Journal of Psychiatry, there was 3,500 middle-aged participants, and there was some of them put on a whole foods diet, so fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, fish, things like that. And the other half were put on a processed diet, so cereals, sugars, things like that. And 5 years later then, the processed foods group had a 58% increased risk of depression, and the whole foods group had a 26% reduced risk of depression. So again, knowing that the foods that you're eating now can affect your mental health down the line as well is a huge benefit. I always say to people, it's not the one Snickers that's going to do the damage. It's not the one bottle of Coke. It's the cumulative effect that you have. If you do something all the time, every single day, that's when the damage happens. So again, looking at your personal health. So what is it? What is health? So personal health is defined as all of the 5 things underneath. So again, looking at a waist circumference. So a waist circumference of less than 90 centimeters for males and less than 80 centimeters for females. Okay. A fasting blood sugar or fasting blood glucose of less than 5.6 millimoles per litre. A blood pressure of less than 140 milligrams for your systolic and less than 90 for your diastolic. So the diastolic is the bottom number and the systolic is your top number. Ideally though, blood pressure should be around 120 over 80. That should be your ideal. Then the fasting triglycerides, again, which is a fat, is less than 1.7, and the fasting HDL cholesterol is greater than 1.03 for men and greater than 1.29 for females as well. So knowing those in advance of where you're sitting, I think, is a really good indicator of where your health is at. So for example, if your blood pressure is 150 over 100, then you know that, okay, I need to try and bring that down. If your triglycerides are a lot higher than they should be, again, look at where you can kind of make changes in that situation. So waist circumference is an easy one. The others you can get done. Blood pressure is another easy one. But your blood sugar, your triglycerides, and your HDL, you can get them done from a blood test, and it would be a very, very interesting thing for you to check and monitor every year so that you know where you're sitting. So just in relation to the 5 of those, if 3 of them or more are elevated or out of parameters, you're in line to have what's known as metabolic syndrome. So 3 to 5 are out of range. This would mean that the individual is on course for metabolic syndrome and is no longer maintaining personal good health. So metabolic syndrome is defined as a cluster of the most dangerous heart disease risks. So things like diabetes, raised fasting blood sugars, abdominal obesity, high cholesterol and high blood sugar. Or high blood pressure, sorry. So metabolic syndrome is becoming hugely prevalent at the moment, and also things like obesity in general in Ireland is becoming a huge issue. I mean, even for kids, like 1 in 4 children on the island of Ireland are currently overweight or obese. So that's a massive statistic. And we as a nation are on track to becoming one of the fattest nations in Europe by 2030. So that's only 10, 12 years away. So that's not a huge, difference in what we're experiencing right now. So it is something to be very mindful of. It is something to be mindful of in terms of kids as well, because they're the next generation coming through. So just to understand the negative connotations. So for yous at work, practical steps on achieving personal good health would be looking at the real food lifestyle, the importance of sleep and exercise. I think in work-life balance, you want to keep it simple because you already have enough stress at work, you have enough to do at work, you don't want to be making it hugely complicated. So again, just looking at keeping it very, very simple, making sure you're eating real food, that you're sleeping well, which that should facilitate with your good foods, and a little bit of exercise where you can as well is very, very important. So the real food lifestyle. So although as humans we need a minimum amount of energy to maintain personal good health, the real food lifestyle does not recommend counting calories. So instead, following these 3 focuses on healthy living. So again, eat real food until you're satisfied. So you're looking at nutrient density of foods rather than caloric density of foods. Okay, so foods that are naturally nutritionally dense and minimally altered from their natural state, which will nourish you and satisfy hunger. So I always say to people, eat food as close to its real state as possible. So eating an apple as opposed to an apple tart. The processing has gone into that, like those kind of situations. Avoid fake processed foods as much as you can. So these are foods that obviously have been highly processed from their natural state with free sugars, highly processed oils, 4 to 5 nutrients, and they do not nourish you and they do not satisfy your hunger because again, they're probably just giving you more sugars and again, they're spiking that insulin and altering your mood as a result. And being active every day as well, if you can. Even just looking at some kind of, there's so many activities out there now, it's amazing, but even just some activity that you can do that would get you involved in a little bit more movement, whether it's a Fitbit or some kind of wearable, or even just steps and very simply walking to the bus stop or parking the car further away or whatever it is, but a conscious effort to move your body more. Even like when you're sitting at your desk, get up, set a wee alarm every 45 minutes and get up and walk around and come back. And it breaks your focus as well and it keeps you focused for that period because you can't really keep your attention for more than that anyway, So trying to do small things like that throughout your day, which can become really, really beneficial. So then examples of real food, so breaking it down then for yourself, so things like fats and proteins, so organic eggs, mackerel, salmon, grass-fed beef. Now, grass-fed beef is a very American term, sorry. Beef in Ireland is grass-fed. In America it's corn-fed, which is why they say grass-fed. But beef from Irish beef is grass-fed. Chicken, lamb, avocados, olives, full-fat cheese, full-fat yogurts, almonds, macadamia nuts, Brazil nuts, walnuts. Those kind of things would definitely be really, really beneficial to include in your day all the time. And again, I wouldn't be worried about fats the way we used to be worried about fats. The research has changed hugely in terms of fats and heart disease. So it's sugar again as the enemy there and more so than fats. Okay. okay? If any of you are following medical science, there's a Dr. Asim Malhotra, he's a top cardiologist in the UK, and he's kind of leading the change on fat health, and he's trying to change everyone's, what the research used to say that it was fat was the issue. So he's trying to lobby with sugar manufacturers to try and get them to reduce it. So fats and proteins, those are the big things you have to include. Carbohydrates, again, looking at fruit and veg as your carbohydrate first, and then adding in your grains after that. So making sure you have loads of different colours if you can. So again, all of your vegetables, your broccoli, spinach, your greens, your peppers, tomatoes, all of those. And then again, your apples, strawberries, oranges, things like that. Sourdough breads are great. Legumes again, so your chickpeas, your lentils, hummuses, those kind of things. Wild rice rather than white rice. Again, rice can be quite high in the glycemic index. So again, if you can look at keeping in the brown rice or the wild rice, they have the outer husk, which reduces the fibre, or increases the fibre but reduces the sugar release. And quinoa, sourdough breads, those kind of things, absolutely fantastic carbohydrates that you can add in as well. Drinks, water, herbal teas, coffee, and I know there's a huge stigma with coffee being really, really bad, but what I would always say to people is it depends on how you're using it. If you're using coffee as your crutch, if you're using coffee to give you energy, then you're using it in the wrong way, because your body should be able to manufacture its own energy. You should be able to, I always say to people, your food that you put into your body should be like what you put into your car. So when you put in petrol into a petrol car, it goes. If you put in diesel, it doesn't. And it's the same thing for us. If we put in processed carbohydrates, sugars, all of those kind of things, we don't function very well, There'll be a huge amount of imbalances. So again, looking at when you're using coffee, if you're using it to stimulate, to give you energy, then you're using it in the wrong way. Oils, things to put in, definitely real butter, coconut oil, ghee, which is clarified butter, cold pressed olive oil, those kind of things. Definitely include a lot of oils and things like that in salads, and it all depends in context, but that can give you a good idea of what to kind of include for things. Example then of processed foods. So fats and proteins in terms of processing would be low-fat cheeses, low-fat yogurt, low-fat breads, anything like that that is low-fat, because again they're chemically altered. Beans in sauces, flavoured or unsalted nuts, salted nuts. In the carbohydrate range then, the list is endless for that. So there's sugary cereals, refined breads, refined pastas, crisps, biscuits, cakes, sweets, pastries, you name it, all of those, and everyone's very aware of the carbohydrates that are processed as well. Drinks, again, looking at soft drinks, fruit juices, low-fat milk, sugary milkshakes, pre-packed smoothies, those kind of things. So again, where possible, trying to make your own at home if you can, or buying something that is, the ingredient list is literally 5 lines, or 5 words. And oils, again, the processed oils would be things like sunflower oils, corn oils, vegetable oils, soy oils, all of those. So I'm just going to, there's a very short little video I just wanted to show you.
High school student Randy Garner stayed awake for 264 hours. That's 11 days to see how he'd cope without sleep. On the second day, his eyes stopped focusing. Next, he lost the ability to identify objects by touch. By day 3, Garner was moody and uncoordinated. At the end of the experiment, he was struggling to concentrate, had trouble with short-term memory, became paranoid, and started hallucinating. Although Garner recovered without long-term psychological or physical damage, for others, losing shut-eye can result in hormonal imbalance, illness, and in extreme cases, death. We're only beginning to understand why we sleep to begin with, but we do know it's essential. Adults need 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, and adolescents need about 10. We grow sleepy due to signals from our body telling our brain we are tired, and signals from the environment telling us it's dark outside. The rise in sleep-inducing chemicals like adenosine and melatonin send us into a light doze that grows deeper, making our breathing and heart rate slow down, and our muscles relax. This non-REM sleep is when DNA is repaired and our bodies replenish themselves for the day ahead. In the United States, it's estimated that 30% of adults and 66% of adolescents are regularly sleep deprived. This isn't just a minor inconvenience. Staying awake can cause serious bodily harm. When we lose sleep, learning, memory, mood, and reaction time are affected. Sleeplessness may also cause inflammation, hallucinations, high blood pressure, and it's even been linked to diabetes and obesity. In 2014, a devoted soccer fan died after staying awake for 48 hours to watch the World Cup.
So you can see from that just goes into like a genetic condition then with sleep. So you can see from that how important sleep is in relation to what it can affect if you don't have proper sleep. So again, you know yourself, if you don't have a good night's sleep, you'll get up, you'll be cranky, and then that's when poor food choices come in. That's when you'll grab something quicker but just to get you through, and you'll know then, and then it might affect your sleep then again the next night. And if that's a pattern, because it's we can detoxify a huge amount during the day with our own organs in terms of liver and things like that, kidneys. But if we don't sleep, we don't get to detoxify our brain. And that's when you can become very cranky, very moody, all of those kind of things. So again, looking at sleep and giving it the attention that it needs. The biggest culprit is, sleep, I think I always say to people, is twofold. So it's behavioural, but it's also, nutritional as well. In terms of behavioural aspects, it's the sleep hygiene around going to bed. So it's being addicted to like the laptop, the iPhone, the iPad before you go to sleep. The blue light that is emitted from that will stimulate your pineal gland in the back, and that will prevent you, so it will interrupt the process that we have when we lie down and naturally slow down. So our sleep chemical is called melatonin. Precursor to that is tryptophan. So tryptophan is an amino acid that we get from things like bananas, we get it from turkey, we get it from meats and things like that in general. If we're not converting the tryptophan, then we convert it to serotonin during the day to keep us happy, and melatonin at night. If there's a disruption in that pattern, we're not making hormones, so we're not sleeping very well, which is why there'll be a lot of people maybe prescribe melatonin or sleeping tablets or things like that again. So looking at your behavioural mechanisms around sleep as well. So are you constantly disrupting that process at night with your blue light? Are you not relaxing? Are you stressed? Are you constantly going and not relaxed? So looking to see if you can do something in that situation. Can you unwind? Can you switch the laptop off at 9:30 to be in bed for 10:30 or whatever way it works for you, Give yourself that hour, that 20 minutes at least, something that you can do to just kind of unwind and relax and facilitate a little bit more sleep. And looking at not putting in like coffees and stimulants at that point as well. The other big thing, and probably one of the most important things, is exercise. So at work, it's a little bit harder to exercise. It's only obviously after work if you can, or if there's gyms or things like that. But definitely committing to moving your body a little bit more while you're at work. So again, as I was saying before, can you get up from your desk? Can you walk around? Can you do a walk on your lunch? Can you take the stairs instead of taking the lift? Is there something that you can do to try and move your body a little bit more to get yourself a little bit more focused? And sometimes water helps that as well, to try and drink a little bit of water, and then it kind of refreshes you a little bit more so you can get up and do something else as well. So increasing your exercise reduces feelings of fatigue, stress, anxiety, things like that. Again, improving mood all the time at work. It helps to keep you a little bit calmer, because you don't want that situation where you're so stressed out and someone asks you questions and you blow the fuse. That's not what you want, So trying to keep yourself quite calm as well is good. So even trying some desk exercises that you can do at work will be ideal as well. All right. So does anyone have any questions in terms of how they struggle at work, or if there's anything that the foods that they eat or anything like that, or fatigue, or
What about suggestions for children, just to keep their moods calm?
The biggest one I think for children.
And treats.
Yeah, treats can be a hard one. But the biggest thing, if you can try and reduce the sugars, that's I know it's not easy. Is it for sleep specifically, or for in general?
Just in general.
Just in general. Just in general, then I would say if you can try and give them fruits as treats, as opposed to giving them sugar, like actual processed sugars. If you can give them, and I know they're not brilliant at vegetables, but if you can try and make even smoothies, or and do variations of that, making a smoothie and then freezing it as a nice pop for them, or try and sneak in a few more vegetables into it. But yeah, definitely if you can try and stay away from the chocolates and crisps and all that kind of stuff. Or if you are doing them, only do them sporadically, not every day, because again, a treat should be a sporadic thing as opposed to being an everyday event. Just after dinner I'm getting a treat, and that's when everything has kind of gone on with way too many treats. So it's not an easy answer, but I suppose I wish there was something I could just say that would make it easier, but definitely you can try and reduce the sugars. They'll not thank you in the moment, but they will thank you afterwards.
It is handy the school won't let them have
a lot of them,
midweek,
yeah.
It's Friday. Yeah.
Friday,
It does
Yeah.
help.
And I think actually as well, we focus a huge amount on kids' health, and which is brilliant, but we don't then put it into our own system as well. We're running around after them and we're like, oh, I'll just grab something here, you know, whereas putting your own nutrition first as well is very, very important.
Is there a time period that you should always focus on between having a coffee and then getting good sleep for bedtime, say?
Yeah, now it will depend on the health of your adrenal glands. If you suffer with fatigue, or if you have any kind of fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndromes or any of those kind of issues. But generally what I would say to people, if you do feel that caffeine affects you, and you'll know that when you take a coffee if you feel a bit jittery, then I would say about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon to give your body a chance to process and get rid of. But definitely not more than that if you are. But you'll know yourself if coffee doesn't really affect you, if you don't have caffeine sensitive, then up to 5 or 6 o'clock, but I wouldn't be going taking it just before you go to bed at night.
Right.
And Orly, you know, you said low-fat options are chemically changed or whatever.
Yeah.
Would that be true even of things like that don't have like any sweeteners or anything, like natural yogurt or low-fat milk and stuff?
I would, yeah, I'd always go natural yogurt, absolutely perfect. I wouldn't necessarily go low-fat natural yogurt, I would go full-fat. And what was the other one? Low-fat milk. Full-fat milk is absolutely fine.
My kids don't like full-fat milk.
Do they not? Okay. Full-fat milk, or if they take the low-fat milk, then absolutely fine. But generally, it's the fats that you're looking to get from that, and the fats are brilliant in the dairy if they don't have any intolerances or allergies or anything like that. But generally, the full-fat is better. If they don't, then low-fat is fine. But if you're going for like yogurts, if they can try and do the pure, like the full-fat natural yogurt rather than a processed, like sugary yogurt, you know, like the Petit Filous or those kind of things, is much better.
So the natural yogurts don't, like they're healthy alternative option?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, natural yogurt, and even putting in things like chia seeds or flax seeds or nuts and seeds or any kind of berries.
Normal fruit.
Absolutely, rather than your own.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
do that a bit, like make fruit salads and just put natural yogurt on top.
I
Yeah,
just heard yogurt is high in sugar, so stop on
No, but natural yogurt.
they are if they're flavoured.
Okay.
Yeah, if they're flavoured, and the same with the milky, like the what are they called?
the Aptamels.
Yes, those kind of things, absolutely. Yeah, or the yops, those was the word I was looking for. Those kind of flavours, they're very high in sugars. And even the Benecol and the Danones and those kind of things that you would take for reducing cholesterol are very high in sugar. So again, I wouldn't look at doing that. I'd put in, you know, if you're trying to look at reducing cholesterol, then look at reducing sugars, look at reducing your low-fat products, put in your full fats. Which sounds counterintuitive, but it's not.
And brown bread wasn't like mentioned anywhere as a good food, or you know. So I mean, obviously a lot of us eat bread, and kids take sandwiches to school all the time and stuff.
Yeah.
Now I know obviously like white processed bread is probably the worst, but you know, is there a bread that you would feel is less?
Bread is bread is a funny one because you have a huge amount of people that have obviously celiac, but you have a huge amount of people that would have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which is where they present with the same as the celiac, but they don't have, it doesn't come up in the blood test. So again, they benefit from gluten-free. The biggest thing I would say to you about bread is if you can try and do breads that are from like darker, so things like rye, things like pumpernickel, they're all really, really good. If you can tolerate them, absolutely perfect. Rather than the very processed white breads, like McCambridge's is a great bread, you know, and the way that it's milled, a lot of people can seem to tolerate it quite well as well. But again, you're looking for the darker, if you can go, even when you're in like a Voca or any kind of, you know, supermarket, you'll see the loaves that you'll have to slice. Those are fine. Again, you're not going to overdo it because they can be expensive and you're not going to take 3 or 4 slices of it. So those are a lot better rather than the loaf. If kids would eat them, you know, or even making your own porridge bread, you know, with oats and you know, milk and yogurt and things like that would be a lot more beneficial as well. Anything that has less processing, because again, it's not the thing with the processing is the chemicals that your body doesn't know what they are, and your body has to then use energy to try and break them down, and then that's when, you know, things can become imbalanced. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
You know, for like a guideline daily amount, it feels like there's been a talk about 2,000 calories per woman or 2.5. That doesn't really count anymore.
It very much depends on the level of activity, and it depends on what you're trying to achieve. So if you're trying to achieve muscle gain, then you will have more than that, you know. And it sounds counterintuitive that you're going to have more if you're trying to lose weight, but it depends. The biggest factor there that you need to figure out is what's called your BMR, which is your basal metabolic rate. What is your body burning at rest? So if you're burning, for example, 1,500 calories for your heart to beat and your lungs to breathe, then you need to be putting in extra fuel on top of that, because that's in the bank. That's what your body will burn. So you need to be putting in extra to function. And if you're doing exercise on top of that, so you might be looking at about 3,000 calories if you're exercising and if you're functioning on a day-to-day basis in terms of going to work and being stressed. So it very much depends on what you're trying to achieve, is what I would say first. But again, that would be the common denominator to figure out your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, and then you'll know from there. But yeah, you're right. Like it doesn't really stand anymore in terms of 2,000 and 2,500. It depends on activity level and what you want to do.
And in the calorie types that you're going to take in, is it try and focus on your fats and your proteins to get that calories intake higher? Or you know, if you were to say take spoiled food like a bar or something to push it up there, would that be counterproductive in what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I suppose the way that I'd answer that is I'd look at the functionality. So if you're finding that you're putting in that extra bit of sugar in the gym and you're really struggling then hitting the end of the workout or something like that, or you're really struggling halfway through, then you'd look at, okay, you're not processing the sugar very well, or something's imbalanced there. So you look at the functionality of your body in that situation. What's imbalanced, what's not working, and then you'd see then, is there another way I can get the fats in or the protein or the calories up without having to go the process routes? Can I put in more avocados? Can I add something else to a smoothie? Can I have an extra overnight oats or whatever it is? You know, looking at the composition of that, but in context of functionality. You know, so even if you feel like your muscles are sore or you're not recovering better or those kind of things, I would look at there might be issues around that as well. Any other questions?
I'm gonna ask. Sorry, go on. I want to ask about dairy.
Yes.
Because loads of naturopaths are saying to stay away from dairy.
Yeah.
And I've recently come off it and I feel like so much better.
Yeah.
So I kind of just wanted to see what your opinion, because you're saying milk and cheese and stuff, but
for me, it depends. It depends on where you're coming from. If you have an intolerance to dairy, if you are someone that has had, for example, strep throat in the past, there's an intolerance there to dairy. If you're someone that has had recurring infections, if you feel that you have a coffee and you create, because dairy is very mucus forming, so if you have a coffee and you feel very mucousy and you start coughing instantly, then I would look at removing it completely. Again, it depends on if you can process it, and by processing it I mean if you have the enzyme to break it down. So it can be the lactase that you don't have, and the lactase is the enzyme for the lactose, which is the sugar, or it could be the casein, or it could be the whey, so it could be that the protein content of it is maybe a little bit higher and you don't have the enzymes to break it down. So a lot of people, when they remove it, they feel a huge amount better. So again, it's looking at their digestive health initially and then looking at it afterwards. But it's also, there's a big fear there when you do remove dairy that you're not getting enough calcium. But what I would always say to that is calcium and magnesium work synergistically in the body, and with milk and cheese and everything like that, there's no magnesium in that, but you will get huge amount of magnesium in dark green leafy vegetables, so in nature and natural products. So spinach, kale, broccoli, all of those have huge amounts of calcium and magnesium, and you absorb a lot more calcium that way as well. So looking at other ways that you can get calcium in is a lot more beneficial. So it would depend. If you're asking me personally, I'm not a huge fan of dairy, but for me it depends on if you can break it down. If someone can break it down, absolutely they tolerate it well and there's no problem to take it. And it's a great source of fats, it's a great way to get fats in. But again, if you're struggling, then I'll take it out. Thanks.
And what about potatoes? Obviously they're classed as a carbohydrate.
Yes.
Kids and that, so you know, if you're having a dinner, do you cut down on the Potato.
You could look at adding in like more slow releasing carbohydrates, so things like sweet potato, brown rice, quinoa, those kind of things are a little bit easier. Potatoes they're a great food. Again, they have vitamin C and things like that in them as well in the skin. But the only reason that potatoes get a hugely bad press is because they are quite high in starch. And if you have an upset gut in terms of if you've low good bacteria, they can affect you a huge amount more, so you can then have a very distended stomach after you have potatoes because of the high starch content. So again, I hate to say it again, but I would always depend on what you're coming to me with. But if you can tolerate them, then fine, but there's other ways of getting the carbohydrate in as well. So trying to maybe introduce sweet potato, the quinoa, wild rice, those kind of things. But keep the potatoes there, but just kind of cycle them a bit more rather than just having potato every single day of the week, if that makes sense. Or a lot of the time what you can do is mix in, if you're doing a mash, just mashed potatoes, mix in carrot and parsnip with it as well, or mix in different vegetables like often what I would do for parents is tell them to steam broccoli and put it in a blender and do it like a rice, and then add in the potatoes into that as well, and kids will start to eat that a wee bit better as well. So small little things that you can do to try and not just have a completely potato, blend it a little bit.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions?
And what about food? I'm specifically thinking about some players, like there's a lot of training in football, say pre-football training, or then food for recovery afterwards.
So pre-training, you're looking at trying to put in carbohydrate source, so giving you fuel. So things like oats are great. Things like if he does take protein powders, again look at the type of protein powder he's taking and look at the ingredients and try and stay. Oh, what age is he?
He's 15.
Oh, that's okay. So then looking at oats, looking at like even any kind of little snack bars that you can make yourself or those kind of things. I try and stay away from the fulfill bars. They're absolutely everywhere, but they're loaded with sugar. So trying to stay away from those. If you can get smoothies into them, they're a great source of energy as well.
And that's before training.
That's before training. After training, what you're focusing on is a little bit of carbohydrate as well, but mostly magnesium. You're looking at nutrients that you can put in afterwards. So magnesium is it's a mineral that relaxes everything inherently in the body. So the biggest thing with athletes and with training and things like that is a thing called DOMS, which is delayed onset muscle soreness. So it's just sore muscles after you're working out. So to try and reduce that as much as you can, you're looking at magnesium. You can get that in dark green leafy vegetables, you can get it in nuts and seeds, those kind of things, but also looking at if you want to put it in supplement form. There's a really nice product, it's called MIG 365, and you can get it in loads of pharmacies and health food stores as well. Mix a little bit of it with warm water, let it fizz up and drink that down. It's fantastic for recovery and for relaxing everything in the body as well. Anyone else?
No?
Perfect.
Right.
Happy?
Yeah.
It's great.
It's practice.
It's very interesting.
Good, yeah. If you have any questions, you just have my details. I'll give you my card, so you can let me know if you have any specific questions around work or anything like that.
Cheers, thank you.
Know. You're very welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The other end. Thank you.